This is a cast iron pan, and this is a carbon steel pan. When it comes to cooking, both of these are great at a lot of similar things. Both are not so great when it comes to a few things. And each one of these is better than the other when it comes to some specific things. Well, by the end of this video, you will know all the things and which one of these pans might work better for you. Hello and welcome to I Want to Cook. My name is Chef Matt and this channel is all about helping you be a better cook no matter your skill level. And yes, today we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, cookware, specifically cast iron cookware versus carbon steel cookware. Now for this video, the examples I'm using are a Lodge cast iron pan, and this one is made by a French company, and although just reading the name you might want to say De Buyer, I believe the correct pronunciation, and forgive me if I butcher it, is De Bouillet. There are, of course, other manufacturers making both types of pans, but these are well known. And I should also note, this isn't sponsored or anything like this. I buy these pans with my own money. Now, both of these companies go back a long time. Lodge goes back to 1896, and De Bouillet goes back even further to 1830. So they've been making these pans for a long time. Now, that history isn't the only similar thing about these kinds of pans. The first thing that cast iron and carbon steel have in common is that they're really tough. I mean, they can take a beating. You can use metal utensils on these things. You can really kind of bang them around a bit. I mean, they are just really tough pans. If you're the kind of person who finds yourself, again, using metal utensils or just frankly, not really all that careful with your cookware when you're cooking, then, you're gonna love either these types of pans and either this type of cookware. The second thing they have in common is that they're both relatively inexpensive. I mean, as far as bang for your buck, I think both cast iron and carbon steel are among the absolute best values in the world when it comes to cookware. Both of these will probably last a lifetime. I mean, it really doesn't take all that much to keep these going years and years. So, both of these, they start at about like $20 or so. You can get a nice Lodge cast iron pan made in America, again, around $20, and you can get a nice De Bouillet made in France skillet like this for, I think they start at like $23 here in the US. And, I think both of that is a phenomenal value, especially for a pan that's going to last a long time. Another thing that both of these types of cookware have in common is that they can be used on a variety of cooking elements, from just a gas range to an electric range to even an induction stove. Both of these work great on induction because they're highly magnetic. If you're wondering if your boy, that's hard to say. If you're wondering if your cookware will work on induction, I did a whole video on what to know about induction cookware and what might work, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below. And they even work over an open flame like a campfire. Both of these are great for that. Now, something to keep in mind with both of these types of pans, both of this type of cookware, and this is kind of going to be a negative for a lot of folks, is that they really are hand wash only. Both of these types of cookware, they require a little more maintenance than just, your average pot or pan. You don't just really throw one of these in the dishwasher. Both of these really need to be hand washed, and you probably don't want to use soap on either of them. They really are just kind of a water type of affair and maybe a scrub to get any grime off. Similarly, both of these pans are going to need seasoning, and that's where you put a coat of oil on them to kind of keep up that non-stick finish that they naturally develop. Again, it's just part of their maintenance process. And another thing that they unfortunately have in common is that both of these will rust if they are not thoroughly dried. Again, cast iron and carbon steel, they're a little more high maintenance. And when I say a pan is high maintenance, it's things like that, where if you leave one of these wet and you don't dry it off and you blink, the thing is gonna rust. Now, again, that's fine. I mean, My pans do rust, I'll admit that, but that's easy to take off. You know, just a little steel wool or a little scrubber, that'll take rust right off, but it is something to know if you are interested in using this type of cookware. And finally, I should note that both of these actually are made out of iron. Both are considered alloys, and they are made out of a majority iron and then some carbon. This has about 99% iron and 1% carbon, and a cast iron pan actually has a little bit more carbon than a carbon steel pan, ironically. Now let's talk about the ways in which a cast iron pan is better than a carbon steel pan. And the first is just the sheer variety. You know, you can find cast iron in a lot of different types of cookware. You know, you can get a skillet like this, of course. You can get a Dutch oven. You can get a griddle. You can get a grill. I mean, you know, Lodge alone makes just a dizzying amount of cast iron cookware, and it's not just skillets. Carbon steel, on the other hand, you know, you're going to find a common pan like this. This is called a crepe pan. You might also find a wok, you know, a wok that you would use for like a stir-fry recipe. Those are often made of carbon steel, but you just don't have the variety of cookware that you would with cast iron. And as far as retail stores, cast iron is just easier to find. I mean, it's more widely available. You know, you can go to like any retail store like a Target or a Walmart and find cast iron. You might have a little bit harder time finding carbon steel. You would have to go to like a dedicated cooking store or of course online. But you know, you can go just about anywhere and find cast iron. And I found there's also more manufacturers making cast iron. Now here in the US, Lodge is the big one, but there's also some really nice high-end purveyors of cast iron cookware. There's also, you know, some cheaper purveyors. But, you know, this is just so popular that there's a lot of different manufacturers making it. But again, carbon steel, you're probably just not going to find the variety of manufacturers making this type of cookware. Now, another trait of cast iron that some are going to find more preferable to carbon steel is that you can get enameled cast iron. And that's kind of its own thing. And I did a video on cast iron cookware versus enameled cast iron. Something like this Le Creuset pot. This is enameled cast iron. But, you know, you should just know that cast iron is available coated in a porcelain ceramic like this. And that has its own benefits. And again, I'll put a link to that video below just in case you're wondering, you know, cast iron versus enameled cast iron. Now, when it comes to longer oven use, that's another way in which cast iron is better than carbon steel. Now, a carbon steel pan can go in the oven, but like Debouillet only recommends it for about 10 minutes, which really isn't that long. But, you know, just a normal cast iron pan like this, I mean, you can leave that thing in the oven for, well, probably as long as you'd like, and it's going to be fine. So if you do a lot of oven cooking, a cast iron cookware is probably going to be better for you than a carbon steel pan like this. And finally, cast iron retains its heat longer than a carbon steel pan. So, you know, something like fajitas where maybe you're serving at tableside or you just want the heat to be retained in whatever food you made, that's going to be another positive of cast iron that outweighs carbon steel. But that is not to say that carbon steel does not have its advantages. It certainly does. And the first is just in weight. I mean, carbon steel, you know, after you lift up one of these cast iron pans, which are heavy, you know, carbon steel is going to feel super light. And even though it's got some heft to it itself, it's a lot lighter than a cast iron pan. So if you just don't want to be, you know, lifting something like a cast iron pan, but you want a lot of its same attributes, carbon steel is great. And similarly, a carbon steel pan takes up far less room than a cast iron pan. I mean, you know, just look at these here. Because this is thinner, this is going to be just easier on your pantry as far as space goes. Another advantage of carbon steel over cast iron is that it heats up quicker. So that's kind of the inverse of, you know, even though a cast iron pan retains its heat longer, well, carbon steel heats up quicker, and it's also just faster acting. So, if you're cooking something with like a lot of finesse and you really need control of that heat, you might risk overcooking something in a cast iron pan where you need to turn the heat down quickly and not burn the food. That's where carbon steel is just going to be better. It's just quicker to react. Another way in which carbon steel is better than cast iron is the surface. The surface is a lot smoother. And, if you've ever looked at a cast iron pan, you'll notice that there's like these little pits on it. And that can make it a little bit hard if you're trying to do something delicate, like maybe shuffle some eggs or flip an omelet or make a crepe, which this pan is kind of designed for. That's a little bit harder with all those little micro pits and grooves in a cast iron pan. But a carbon steel pan, nice, slick, and smooth. And I find personally, when it comes to like searing meat or searing something, I actually like carbon steel more because, again, I think there's just a little bit more surface area on that pan to get all those nice crispy, crunchy bits. Now, another way that carbon steel is better than cast iron is that it's actually tougher. So believe it or not, cast iron, it's described as fragile. And that's just that, if we drop it, it can chip, it can get damaged, even as tough as it is. And that's just because of the way it's made with the casting process. But carbon steel, I mean, not that you'd want to go about dropping your pans on the floor, but if you drop a carbon steel pan, it might dent a little bit, but it's probably going to be just fine. And finally, this last trait is kind of subjective, but it's exclusivity. If you're using something like a carbon steel pan, you probably know what you're doing. This is a nice kind of serious pan for the serious cook. These are used a lot in restaurants, and if you're using these at home, it just shows you probably know what you're doing. Okay, so which one of these is better? Well, hopefully by my answers and the way you're thinking about it it really depends. These are both great and I use them a lot. I've made a lot of videos on cast iron pans. I've done videos on, reasons to cook with it, reasons not to cook with it, but I haven't done as much on carbon steel. In fact, I don't think I've done any videos on carbon steel, and I figured it was due time because these are great. And, both cast iron and carbon steel has a place in my kitchen. I do have quite a bit of room for my cookware, and I have a lot of cookware. But if, you're on a budget, or you just don't have the space or time or just even the care to have lots of different pots and pans, hopefully this video can help you make a decision on which of these is right for you. But again, the nice thing is they're both really inexpensive. So even if you buy one of these and you find that, it's not really for you, you're not out a whole lot of money. So there you go. There's a little comparison of carbon steel versus cast iron. I hope this kind of helps you make up your mind, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, which one of these do you use? Which do you prefer? Maybe you've tried them both and you've come to your own conclusions. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Welcome to my kitchen. I am so glad that you are here. Until next time, I hope you want to cook.